All right, guys, today for your mini lesson, we are going to be starting some poetry. April is National Poetry Month. It's a celebration of poetry which takes place each April. It was introduced in 1996. Fun fact, Miss B and I were 6 years old then, and is organized by the Academy of American Poets as a way to increase awareness and appreciation of poetry in the United States. So I like reading poetry. I like talking about poetry, so that's what we're going to do this week. In regards to poetry, we are going to be focusing on theme. And this should be a very basic reminder for you of what a theme is because we've gone over it all year long. So, how do poets convey theme? So, theme is the main message a story or poem is trying to convey about life. It's very, very similar in poetry as it is in a story. It's just sometimes not as easy to figure out. You kind of have to read between the lines and think about it a little bit more. But just like in every story and every poem, there is a theme. And then, how can I determine what the theme of a poem is? Poets and other writers develop themes to express their ideas about life or human nature. A lot of poets write about their own experiences, they write about nature, things that are going on in the world, different issues like that, very similar to stories that we have read in class. So today we're just going to be focusing on that. We're going to read a poem, answer some questions. I'm going to show you an example, and then you are going to do the same thing for practice today. All right, so to determine the theme in a poem, we have to ask ourselves some of the following questions to help us determine the theme. Like I was saying, it's not as clear in a poem as it might be in a story. In poetry, the person talking to you is called the speaker. And then we have to think about what he is saying in order to develop that theme. So I'm just going to kind of read through these bullet points quickly. And as I'm reading through them, just think to yourself how that will help you develop a theme. So, are there any problems in the poem? How do they get solved? Just like in every story in a poem, there's issues that happen, and based on how they're solved, we are able to come up with a theme or a lesson that we can take away from the poem. What words in the poem stand out? Poets oftentimes pick specific words that show a lot of figurative language and help you kind of paint a picture in your mind of what is going on and kind of set the scene for you. So that is one way you can help you determine a theme. You also have to think about what emotions are these words associated with. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later today in this mini lesson once we read a poem. Are there any people in the poem? What happens to them? Just like in a story, there's characters, right? They go through different things. They make connections with different people, the world, things like that. And then where does the poem take place? The setting of the poem. A lot of times that'll help you figure out the theme depending on like where in history it takes place maybe, or where in the world it takes place, what time, all those things. And then is there any figurative language? What is the figurative language trying to say? So this is like similes, metaphors, alliteration, all of that stuff. A lot of times poets will use figurative language to kind of intensify or be more dramatic in what they are saying. All right, so for an example today, I'm going to read to you the poem Hope is the Thing with Feathers by Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity. It asked a crumb of me. All right, so if you just read that one time, it probably doesn't make that much sense to you. But by just looking at the title of this, Hope is the Thing with Feathers, if you guys think about what the word hope means, when you have hope for something, it means that you are looking on the bright side and you think to yourself that better days are ahead. And then what has feathers? A bird, right? So they're comparing hope to a bird. And a bird has feathers. And when you think about feathers, you think how birds can fly. They have wings. So it's all about taking that next step and thinking about the title of a poem just to even start with. I kind of broke this up here on the side and kind of talked about what the poem was saying. So the speaker is talking about hope as a bird that perches in our souls, right? I just told you how we got that from the title. And then hope is something that we all have inside of us and sings without us knowing. A lot of times we go through different things in life, and we think that, it's never going to get better, and we just are really down on our luck, and we're just really feeling really, really sad and depressed, right? But inside of us, there's always that tiny little light that just is burning ever so brightly. And that's hope, right? So it's something that we all have inside of us. And sometimes it's there without us even knowing, right? Eventually we kind of, notice it and see that hope is alive in us. And we kind of start to come out of it a little bit. But in this poem, it's saying that we all have it inside of us and it sings without us knowing, just comparing it to like that fire I said. And then even when we face the storms of life, we all still have hope that keeps us warm in our souls. Saying that the storms that we go through in life are different things that challenge us or make us kind of have to jump through some hoops. But along the way, we still have that hope that things are going to get better. And it's like the warmness in our souls that keeps us going, that hope inside of us. And then hope is something that never asks for anything in return. And if you think about it, it's kind of true, right? We all hope for something. We all hope that, we can get out of this quarantine and move on and go back to work and school and go back to Target and TJ Maxx and all those places we want to go to. So hope is something that never asks for anything in return. We all have hope inside of us, right? We didn't have to buy it. We didn't have to keep wanting it. It's just something that we all have. And it's something that lives on even when we are unaware and going through the toughest of times, right? You always have to have hope. And so this entire poem is just about how hope is inside of us, even when we go through storms. And it's kind of like that bird inside of us. And it eventually takes off and we see it and we have hope. So I really like this poem. So after I read that poem and I kind of figured out what it was talking about, I filled out this chart right here, which you guys are going to do. You guys are going to see the left-hand side, and then you are going to have to fill in the right-hand side. I already did this to kind of give you an example. So the first thing I want you to talk about are what are the problems in the poem that you are reading today? So if we're looking at the poem Hope that I just talked about, the problem in the poem is that hope is found in times of despair or times that are tough, right? Hope is something that is found after something bad or troublesome happens. So that is the problem, right? Hope, a lot of times, it's something great to have, but we tend to have it more in times that aren't so good. And then what words stand out to you? The words that stood out to me, or the phrases, was that it never stops at all. So if I'm thinking about hope and it never stops at all, it just keeps going and going and going. It's something that we all have inside of us. That really stood out to me. I really made a connection with that because it's true. Even though we go through these horrible, tough times, we are still hopeful for something better to come along. And then another phrase I liked was, I've heard it in the chillest land. So even when I've been in my darkest places that I thought I would never climb out of, I still have that hope burning inside my soul a little bit, right? Even in the chillest of times is what that is saying. And then what emotions are those words associated with? So if I think about hope and how it never stops, I'm associating that with the emotion of perseverance, right? Never giving up. It's always burning inside of me. I always have hope. And then the second word or phrase I said was, I've heard it in the chillest land. And I think that is associated with the emotion of strength. So if you are in a super depressed, just everything's going wrong for you, you still have hope inside of you, and that hope gives you strength, even in the darkest, chillest of times. So I associated perseverance and strength with those two phrases that I selected. And then the main thing that we want you guys to do today is kind of come up with a theme for the poem that you are going to read. And by answering these other questions prior to this all helps you develop the theme of the poem. So the theme that I came up with is, remember that there is always a tomorrow and life will get better. right? Because that's the hope that they're talking about in the poem. Hope is something that burns inside of us and reminds us that, there's always going to be a tomorrow. Life's going to get better. So that's a theme that I came up with for this poem. All right, so today you guys are going to be reading a poem by Langston Hughes. It's called Dreams. I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. It says, Dreams. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. So just like I did with the hope poem, you guys are going to be filling out your own chart and turning this into us on Classroom. Think about the problems in the poem. They're talking about dreams, right? Holding on to your dreams. Life is sometimes a broken winged bird that cannot fly, but you have to hold on to that dream. This is similar to the hope poem, guys. So think about that as you're working today. What words stand out to you? Maybe you just list a couple quotes here. Maybe even just one. What stood out to you? And then based on that, what emotion does that make you feel when you read that? How do you feel when you reread those words to yourself? What emotions come out of you? And then based on your answers to those 3 questions, we want you to come up with a theme for this poem. If I were you, I would think about the word dream and include that in your theme, because I think that's probably a good theme here. Okay, so again, if you have any questions about anything, shoot us an email, and then make sure you're turning in your slides on Classroom. Thank you.